Most people don't stay stuck because they lack potential. They stay stuck because, at some point, they get used to settling. Not because life forced them to, but because somewhere along the way, "it's fine" started sounding easier than "I want better." And over time, comfort quietly became the cage that kept them from moving forward. The truth is, you won't always feel ready to change. You won't always feel motivated to show up. In fact, the moments that matter most, the ones that actually shift the trajectory of your life, rarely arrive with perfect timing or ideal energy. They usually come quietly, wrapped in resistance, disguised as small decisions you could easily ignore. Waking up when it's easier to sleep in, speaking up when silence feels safer, doing the thing no one's asking you to do, but you know you should. Leveling up isn't about suddenly becoming a new person overnight. It's about noticing the subtle ways you've been shrinking to fit inside a life that no longer reflects who you are, and choosing, without drama, without applause, to start living just a little closer to the person you were always meant to be. Not out of pressure, not out of ego, but out of a quiet respect for yourself that says, "I may not be there yet, but I won't keep standing still." If this speaks to you, subscribe for more content like this and share your thoughts below. Your story might be the turning point for someone else. Let's begin. 1. Stop settling for less. There's a quiet danger in getting used to just enough. It doesn't show up as chaos, it doesn't shout, it doesn't warn you with flashing lights. It's subtle. It feels like stability, but underneath, it's a slow erosion of your potential. You go to work, do the tasks, come home, go through the motions, and somewhere along the way you stop asking, "Is this still who I want to be?" The answer doesn't come loudly either. It shows up in the sigh at the end of the day, the lack of excitement when the weekend arrives, and the vague sense that something inside you is fading, even though on paper nothing is wrong. That's the trap. Life looks fine, so you convince yourself to stay. And that's how men lose themselves, not in failure, but in comfort. You settle not because you can't do more, but because no one is forcing you to. But if you want to level up your life, you can't keep waiting for pressure from the outside. You have to apply it yourself. You have to force yourself to grow. Settling happens slowly, through thousands of small decisions where you choose ease over effort, distraction over direction, and comfort over clarity. The problem isn't that you're incapable, it's that you've built routines around staying the same. Over time, those routines become an identity. That's why settling is so dangerous. It doesn't just limit your actions, it reshapes the way you see yourself. The moment you stop believing that growth is necessary, your life stops evolving. And the longer you live that way, the harder it is to remember what it felt like to be hungry for something more. In Stoic philosophy, you're taught to confront discomfort directly, not avoid it. Marcus Aurelius wrote not to waste energy wishing for an easier life, but to become stronger. Settling is the opposite. It's the quiet wish that life won't ask more of you than you're willing to give. But life will ask for more. Whether you're ready or not, pressure comes. And when it does, the only ones who rise are those who've trained themselves to face it, not those who spent years avoiding it. So ask yourself honestly, are you still growing or just maintaining? Are your standards today a reflection of your best or a compromise that felt safe enough to live with? Be careful with what you tolerate. What you allow too long, you begin to accept, and what you accept, you eventually become. That's the pattern. If you don't break it, it will shape your future in ways you can't reverse. You don't have to burn everything down to change. You just have to stop pretending that almost good enough is the same as fulfillment. It's not. When you settle, you train your brain to expect less, to try less, and to feel less. That's why you feel numb. Not because something's wrong with you, but because you've gone too long without challenging who you are. You've accepted stillness as peace, when in reality, it's been stagnation. The Stoics believed that peace came not from avoiding difficulty, but from mastering how you respond to it. And that starts with reclaiming your standards. For some, that might mean leaving a job that's secure but soul-crushing. For others, it's about stepping up in a relationship that's coasting. And sometimes it's just about deciding that the way you've been treating yourself, physically, mentally, emotionally, is no longer acceptable. That's where leveling up begins. Not in massive transformations, but in small, relentless acts of self-respect. Waking up earlier, saying no to the easy path, reading instead of scrolling, doing the work when no one claps. These are not glamorous decisions, but they are powerful. Every time you reject mediocrity, you reinforce a new identity, someone who doesn't settle. This isn't about perfection, it's about momentum. And the moment you start making decisions that align with who you could be instead of who you've been, you begin to shift. And when that shift begins, your world adjusts. New opportunities appear, old patterns lose their grip, and something inside you reawakens. The part that remembers you were made for more. Not for comfort, not for the bare minimum, but for impact, growth, and quiet pride in the man you're becoming. So don't settle, not because someone told you not to, but somewhere deep down, you already know you've been playing small. And the longer you delay your growth, the more it costs you. Not just in results, but in self-respect. The Stoics didn't speak of self-worth as a feeling. They saw it as action. To respect yourself is to push yourself. To grow, even when no one asks. To become the kind of man who doesn't wait for life to happen, but who meets it head-on with clarity and conviction. Start there, and don't stop. 2. Do it even when you don't feel like it. Motivation is unreliable. It fades, it skips days, it disappears exactly when you need it most. If you've built your life on waiting to feel ready, you've already lost time you can't get back. The truth is, progress isn't made by the inspired. It's made by the disciplined. And discipline isn't about force. It's about clarity. It's about deciding that what matters will get done, even when you don't feel like doing it. Because if you only show up when it's easy, you'll never get anywhere worth going. The discomfort, the boredom, the resistance, they're not obstacles, they're the price. And the price doesn't go away just because you don't feel like paying it. You don't need to feel inspired to take the first step, you just need to take it. Emotion follows motion. That's not theory, that's reality. The moment you act, even in the smallest way, your mind begins to catch up. But if you sit around waiting for the perfect moment to act, you're not resting, you're hesitating. And hesitation builds hesitation. That's how people spend years in the same loop, thinking, hoping, planning, but never doing. Because they're waiting for a version of themselves that doesn't exist. A future self who feels ready, focused, energized, fearless. That person isn't coming. The only person who matters is the one who acts now, especially when it's inconvenient. This is where the Stoic mind thrives. You don't need external hype. You don't need perfect circumstances. You need presence. You need responsibility. You need to do the work without negotiating with your feelings. The Stoics taught that we should never be ruled by what we feel in the moment, but by what we decide is right. That's why they valued self-discipline over mood. Because the world doesn't wait for your emotions to line up. Life rewards consistency, not enthusiasm, especially when things are quiet, especially when no one's watching. So the question isn't, do I feel like it today? The question is, will I still respect myself if I don't? That's what you need to weigh. Because every time you skip the habit, the routine, the promise, you don't just miss a task. You weaken your own word. You train your mind to accept excuses. Over time, that shapes how you see yourself. That's how self-doubt grows. Not from failure, but from knowing deep down that you didn't show up when you could have. Leveling up isn't about how hard you can go once. It's about how often you're willing to do what's necessary without being asked. And most days, that means doing it without excitement, without applause, without inspiration. Just doing it. Because that's who you are becoming. And that identity, strong, reliable, consistent, isn't built on feelings. It's built on action, repeated under pressure. There is freedom in knowing that you don't need to wait. You can begin the process of becoming more, today, now, regardless of how ready you feel. The man who acts even when it's hard, even when it's dull, even when no one's pushing him, is dangerous. He becomes unstoppable. Not because he's faster or smarter or luckier, but because he keeps moving. And movement, no matter how small, builds momentum. And momentum builds identity. And that identity, that quiet confidence of someone who does what needs to be done, that's the foundation of a powerful life. You don't need to be extreme, you just need to be consistent. You don't need to do it perfectly. You just need to stop disappearing. The world doesn't need another man with potential. It needs more men who execute, who live with intention, who build discipline as a daily practice, who wakes up tired and still moves, who feel uncertain and still lead, who feel fear and still face forward. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. There will be days when everything inside you says, take it easy, push it off, tomorrow's better. And no one will blame you if you listen. But that's not what this is about. This isn't about blame or guilt or pressure. This is about control, inner control, the kind Stoicism teaches, the kind that separates a man who floats through life from a man who drives it forward. You either choose to build yourself through discomfort, or life will build resistance for you through regret. The Stoics didn't wake up every day with perfect peace. They struggled like anyone. But they showed up anyway. They practiced anyway. They wrote, trained, reflected, and fought, even when it would have been easier to quit. Because they understand that your actions define you more than your feelings ever will. So, no, you don't need to feel ready. You don't need to wait for a spark. You need to get up, do the thing, and let your energy catch up with your decision. That's where the power is. In the days you don't want to do it, but you do it anyway. And when that becomes who you are, you won't have to force yourself anymore. It'll just be what you do. 3. Step out of your comfort zone. If everything around you feels familiar, manageable, and easy, chances are you're not growing. And the uncomfortable truth is that most people don't stay stuck because they don't know what to do. They stay stuck because doing something unfamiliar feels like too much. We avoid discomfort not because we're weak, but because we've been trained to chase convenience, predictability, and emotional safety. But nothing about leveling up is convenient. Nothing about becoming more is emotionally safe. Growth, by its very nature, demands that you step outside what feels normal and into what feels awkward, uncertain, and exposed. The Stoics understood this clearly. They didn't view discomfort as something to escape. They saw it as a proving ground, a signal that you were on the edge of becoming. A friend of mine studied finance, graduated with honors, and secured a job at one of the top firms in the city. On paper, she was winning. But after 2 years, she felt hollow. Every day she sat at a desk, crunching numbers, while her mind wandered to something else entirely. She had always loved photography, but never gave herself permission to explore it. Why? Because it wasn't safe. It wasn't predictable. It required starting over. But she knew staying meant slowly dying inside. So she made the choice. Not because she was fearless, but because staying comfortable had become unbearable. She picked up a camera, built a portfolio, took jobs that barely paid, and felt more alive in that first month than she had in the previous 2 years. Today, she doesn't just take photos. She leads creative campaigns, teaches others, and works with brands that once felt out of reach. And it started with one decision: to step outside what was easy and move toward what felt real. That discomfort you're avoiding? It's the doorway. Everything you want to become is on the other side of it. Not just success, not just progress, but alignment, integrity, peace. Not the shallow kind of peace that comes from nothing changing, but the deep kind that comes from knowing you're finally doing what you were meant to do. You can't access that life by staying where it's comfortable. You can only reach it by leaving the shallow waters and swimming into the unknown. The Stoic path is not one of comfort, it's one of courage. Courage to question what's normal. Courage to do the thing that makes your hands shake. Courage to look at your routine and say, this no longer serves who I'm becoming. You can't evolve if you're clinging to habits and environments that were built for a past version of you. If you want to change your life, you have to be willing to break the cycle of safety, not recklessly, but deliberately, stoically, with full awareness that pain, failure, and rejection may come, but also with full belief that the cost of staying the same is far greater. Comfort feels good in the short term, but it robs you of clarity. It blinds you to what's possible. When your life is predictable, your mind stops questioning it. You stop asking if this is really it. And over time, you don't just lose momentum, you lose vision. You forget who you could be. You stop dreaming in the language of potential and start surviving in the rhythm of routine. That's not life. That's quiet decay. And no man was born for that. So if your days feel safe, ask yourself what you've stopped pursuing. If your decisions feel automatic, ask when you last did something that made your heart race for the right reasons. Discomfort isn't always a warning sign. Sometimes it's the most honest signal that you're finally pointing in the right direction, that you're finally walking towards something that matters. And if you wait until you feel ready, you'll wait forever. Readiness doesn't precede growth. It follows it. And confidence, that comes from doing hard things, not from thinking about them. Stepping out of your comfort zone doesn't mean quitting your job tomorrow or burning your life down. It means taking the next right step, even if it feels uncertain. It means letting go of the script you've been living by and writing a new one small choice at a time. It means having the discipline to face the unknown, not because you enjoy it, but because you respect yourself too much to stay small. Remember, the Stoics weren't chasing easy lives. They were chasing the kind of life that made them stronger, clearer, and more useful to the world. They believed that a life of virtue demanded action, and that action meant going where others feared to go. The same applies to you. Your next level won't come from reading more or waiting longer. It will come when you move in spite of the discomfort. You push through even when nothing guarantees a reward. When you say yes to growth, even though comfort is begging you to stay. So don't wait for the moment to feel perfect. Don't wait for the fear to disappear. Just recognize it for what it is, a signal, a call, a quiet invitation to rise above the ordinary. You know the areas in your life where you've been playing safe. You know what you're capable of, and you know what you've been avoiding. Now is the time to decide. Will you keep choosing comfort, or will you choose growth? And when you choose growth, let it be deliberate. Let it be uncomfortable. Let it stretch you, because that's when everything changes, not just what you do, but who you become. 4. Change your daily habits. Every day, you're casting a vote for the kind of person you're becoming, not through grand gestures or life-changing decisions, but through the small, repeated actions you barely notice. The way you wake up, the way you speak to yourself, the way you use your time when no one's watching, those are the things that shape your future. And most people overlook them. They focus on outcomes, on goals, on distant dreams. But the Stoics knew better. They understood that control starts with routine, and that the path to excellence isn't found in intensity, it's found in consistency. If you want to level up your life, you don't start with your job title, your bank balance, or your 5-year plan. You start with how you live between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., with what you repeat when no one is keeping score. There's a man I know who used to unwind every evening with 3 beers and a scrolling session that lasted hours. Harmless, he thought. He worked hard, paid his bills, and stayed out of trouble. But slowly, he noticed the fog in his mind. He struggled to sleep, woke up tired, missed small deadlines, forgot why he walked into rooms. His self-respect started slipping. Not because something massive collapsed, but because the little routines in his life were quietly undermining him. One day, instead of opening a beer, he opened a notebook. He wrote 5 lines. That was it. The next night, he did it again. Within 2 weeks, he felt clearer. He started going to bed earlier. He cut the drinks from 3 to 1. He began feeling like someone in control again. And none of it came from a radical transformation. It came from changing one small thing he did every night and letting that shift ripple outward. That's how real change works. You don't need to overhaul your life in one bold leap. You just need to adjust your trajectory by 1 degree. Because if you change your path by 1% today and stay on that new course, you end up in a completely different destination a year from now. Small disciplines compound, and so do small indulgences. Either way, something is compounding every single day. The question is, are you aware of what you're repeating? The Stoics taught that our power lies in what we choose to control. What you do daily is always within your control. You might not control the economy. You might not control the actions of others, but you control whether you stretch or snooze, whether you reach for your phone or your journal, whether you breathe deeply or rush blindly into the next task. These are not trivial choices. They are foundational. They build your identity. They reveal your priorities, and they either reinforce your discipline or erode it. So many people feel stuck, not because they lack knowledge, but because their habits are misaligned with who they want to be. They want clarity, but start the day with chaos. They want energy, but treat their body like an afterthought. They want progress, but spend their nights numbing instead of building. And slowly, their life starts to feel like something that just happens to them, not something they're actively creating. But the truth is, you are always creating your life. Whether consciously or unconsciously, whether with direction or distraction. The question is not if you're building something. The question is, what are you building without even realizing it? You don't need to be perfect. You don't need a full schedule of high-performance rituals. You just need a few non-negotiables. Anchors. Practices you return to, no matter how chaotic life gets. The Stoics had theirs, morning reflectings, moments of silence. Not to show off discipline, but to train it. Not to look strong, but to be strong. When you control the beginning of your day, you set the tone for everything after it. And when you win the quiet, unnoticed battles, you become the kind of person who wins the visible ones too. So take a moment and audit your life, not by your dreams, but by your patterns. What do you do when you're tired? Where does your attention go when you're stressed? How do you treat yourself in the in-between hours when no one's demanding anything from you? That's where the truth lives. That's where your real habits are hiding. If they're not aligned with who you want to be, then it's time to take responsibility. Not by tearing everything down, but by shifting something small, something daily, something within reach. Ultimately, growth isn't about intensity, it's about direction. A 1-degree shift, repeated long enough, takes you somewhere completely different. And you don't need more time, more energy, or more motivation to start. You just need awareness and the willingness to act on it quietly and consistently. That's how you change your life. Not all at once, but one habit at a time, deliberately, stoically, without fanfare, without waiting. Just do what needs to be done until who you are matches who you were meant to become. 5. See yourself differently. The person you believe you are will quietly shape every decision you make, not just in big moments, but in the quiet, daily choices that define your path. If you see yourself as someone who never follows through, you'll hesitate when it matters most. If you see yourself as average, you'll settle even when excellence is possible. This isn't about ego, it's about identity. The image you carry of yourself, consciously or not, is the ceiling on your growth. Unless you choose to upgrade that image, no amount of motivation, discipline, or strategy will stick. That's why so many people stay in cycles they hate. Not because they can't change, but because they keep seeing themselves through the lens of who they were, instead of who they're becoming. You can't level up if your self-perception is anchored to your past. You can't demand more from yourself if deep down you don't believe you deserve more. And you won't take consistent action if your internal narrative tells you it's not who you are. So it starts here. Not with a new plan, but with a new picture. Not by proving anything to the world, but by quietly choosing to see yourself differently. Not as someone broken, behind, or weak, but as someone in training. As someone who is actively becoming. Because when your identity changes, everything changes. It's easy to carry the weight of past failures as if they define you. Easy to replay mistakes and let them become your story. But the truth is, the person you were back then is not who you are now. And they don't get to decide who you become next. You are not your worst decision. You are not your most tired moment. You are not stuck unless you keep saying you are. Every single day is a chance to shift, even just a little, how you see yourself. And that shift doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be true. You don't need to fake confidence. You need to act like someone who values yourself enough to keep moving forward. Stoic philosophy teaches us that external labels mean nothing. What matters is how you live. What do you think? How you respond to adversity. The Stoics didn't care about appearances. They cared about integrity. And that begins with the internal story you carry. If that story is rooted in weakness, shame, or limitation, then your actions will always mirror it. But when the story starts to reflect strength, responsibility, and potential, your behavior begins to rise to meet it. So if you've been stuck in a cycle of doubt, maybe the first thing to change is how you label yourself. Not the guy who keeps messing up, but the guy who's learning what works. Not someone who quits, but someone who's getting better at staying consistent. These aren't delusions. They're decisions. Small but powerful shifts in language can rewire your identity over time, because your brain listens, and the words you attach to yourself, out loud or in silence, carry more power than you think. Growth doesn't begin with a massive external change. It begins the moment you decide you're no longer going to live like someone who gave up. It begins the moment you say, that version of me had his reasons, but I'm not staying there. And this matters because without identity alignment, your habits will always drift back to their old patterns. You'll start strong, but you'll sabotage yourself. You'll say the right things, but they won't last, because no one consistently acts against who they believe they are. So instead of pushing harder, maybe it's time to look deeper, to ask honestly, who do I actually believe I am when no one's around? If the answer disappoints you, that's okay. That's the moment change becomes possible. You don't change your identity by shouting affirmations into the mirror. You change it by aligning your behavior with who you want to become, quietly, consistently, without asking for permission. Every time you choose the harder path, the more disciplined action, the more aligned thought, you send a signal to yourself. And those signals, over time, build a new internal standard, a new default setting, one based not on your past, but on your potential. You don't need to erase your history. You just need to stop dragging it with you into every room you enter. Let it be part of your story, not your name tag. And if you truly want to level up, then the most powerful place to start isn't with what you do, but with how you see. Look in the mirror, not to judge, but to redirect. Not to replay old scripts, but to reframe them. Speak about yourself like someone who's worth the effort, worth the fight, worth the transformation. And when that identity begins to take root, not overnight but over time, you'll notice something. You'll stop negotiating with yourself. You'll stop explaining your excuses. You'll simply start acting like someone who is ready, someone who belongs where they're going. And from there, momentum builds. Discipline sticks. Progress compounds. Because you're no longer dragging your old self behind you. You're walking forward with the version of you that finally matches what you're truly capable of. So if you feel stuck, maybe it's not the plan that's broken. Maybe it's the way you see yourself. Change that, and everything else begins to shift. Quietly, powerfully, permanently. 6. Choose better people around you. If you constantly feel the need to shrink yourself to stay accepted, you're probably in the wrong room. The people you surround yourself with are not just part of your environment. They are your environment, and the environment always wins. You can read every book, set every goal, and discipline your routine to the minute, but if you stay around people who doubt growth, mock change, and reinforce your lowest standards, you will bend. You will eventually become the average of what they expect from you. That's not a weakness. That's human nature. And if you're serious about leveling up your life, the most strategic move you can make is to upgrade the people around you. I used to be part of a group where every idea I shared was dismissed with sarcasm. Not because it was wrong, but because dreaming made them uncomfortable. Every time I spoke about improving something, my career, my habits, my mindset, it was met with jokes or silence. At first, I told myself I was being too sensitive. Then I realized I wasn't growing. I was defending myself. That's when I walked away and found a different circle. Not one filled with perfection, but with progress. People who weren't just pleasant, they were serious, focused, committed to becoming better day by day. In that space, I didn't feel the need to prove anything. I just started evolving, and faster than I thought possible. That shift didn't come from more willpower. It came from alignment, from stepping into a room where growth was normal, not mocked. Where ambition wasn't threatening, it was expected. That's what happens when you choose your circle with intention. You stop negotiating your potential just to feel included. You stop minimizing yourself just to stay relatable. And for the first time in a long time, you start feeling free. The Stoics were clear. The company you keep matters. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we become what we give our attention to. And people are paying attention. They influence how you think, how you feel, and how you show up, even when you're not aware of it. If your friends constantly distract themselves from responsibility, you'll start doing the same. If they avoid discomfort, you'll slowly normalize your own avoidance. But if the people around you hold high standards, speak with clarity, and live with purpose, you'll rise. Not because they push you, but because they remind you who you really are. Too many people stay stuck, not because they lack motivation, but because they stay in environments that quietly punish effort. Every time you take a step forward, someone makes a joke. Every time you change a habit, someone calls it unnecessary. Over time, you internalize it. You start believing that staying the same is safer, that it's better to be liked than to be excellent. But you weren't built to be liked by everyone. You were built to grow. And growth requires friction. Friction with the old version of you. Friction with the people who liked that version best. This doesn't mean you need to cut everyone out of your life, but it does mean you need to become more selective about who gets access to your energy. You can love someone and still limit their influence. You can respect someone and still choose to grow in a different direction. That's not betrayal. That's my responsibility. And if you don't make that choice, no one else will make it for you. You'll stay surrounded by comfort and wonder why your life still feels small. Look around at the people you spend the most time with. Are they challenging you or calming your ambition? Are they helping you stay focused or helping you avoid the hard stuff? Do you feel more alive after time with them or more drained? These questions aren't just about relationships. They're about trajectory. Nothing affects your discipline, your mindset, and your emotional control more than the people who speak into your life every day. And when you start choosing better people, people who reflect the values you're trying to build, you'll notice something. You start thinking clearer. You start working harder. You stop justifying laziness. And more than anything, you stop feeling alone in your pursuit of more. That's where the real power is. In not having to carry your discipline in isolation. In having people around you who remind you that greatness isn't strange, it's standard. The Stoic mindset isn't built in isolation. It's built in environments that demand self-awareness, intention, and accountability. So, take a hard look at your circle. If you have to lower your standards to belong, you're not growing. You're surviving, and survival was never the point. The point is to live well, with virtue, with clarity, with the kind of quiet strength that comes from knowing you're walking your path, not someone else's. You don't need everyone to understand your journey. You just need a few people who respect it. People who show up, push forward, and expect you to do the same. When that becomes your baseline, you don't have to force progress anymore. It becomes who you are. Not because you changed overnight, but because you finally stopped holding yourself back just to fit into places you'd outgrown. And when that shift happens, everything else moves with it. 7. Build a simple system and stick to it. You don't need a breakthrough. You need a system. Not a grand plan that looks impressive on paper, but collapses under pressure. Just a structure you can repeat, especially when you're tired, distracted, or unmotivated. Real progress isn't built on high-energy days. It's built in the quiet moments when no one's watching and everything in you wants to skip. That's when the system matters. That's when it saves you. And the simpler it is, the more powerful it becomes. When something becomes part of your rhythm, no longer a decision but a default, you stop negotiating. You stop wasting energy by asking, should I? You just do. And in that consistency, everything begins to shift. Most people fail not because they lack talent or desire, but because they keep resetting. They start something, stop it, overthink it, redesign it, and then abandon it. They're trapped in a cycle of intensity without structure. But intensity without a system is chaos. It burns hot and fades fast. What you need is steadiness, a repeatable, sustainable framework that removes the guesswork and anchors your effort, no matter the emotion of the day. And this isn't about discipline for discipline's sake. It's about removing friction. It's about creating flow. The Stoics knew that discipline wasn't about punishment. It was about peace. A system gives you that peace, not because life gets easier, but because your mind stops spinning and starts executing. You don't need to control everything. Just control the repeatable, the small daily actions you can do on autopilot without relying on mood or momentum. Maybe it's writing for 10 minutes, reading 5 pages, exercising for 20. Whatever moves your life forward, build a system around it. Strip it down until it's simple enough to do without motivation and strong enough to withstand distraction. Then protect it, because once it's yours, it becomes the foundation. From there, you can layer, refine, and expand, but it all starts with a core routine that's so ingrained, it feels like breathing. There's a reason why elite performers, successful builders, and Stoic thinkers return to routine. Because when the world is chaotic, the disciplined man has an edge. He's grounded, focused, unmoved by the noise. He doesn't need hype. He has habits. And that's not just philosophy, it's freedom. Freedom from chaos. Freedom from being overwhelmed. Freedom from that voice in your head that keeps asking, what now? You already know the answer. You've already built the plan. You just follow it. That doesn't mean every day will be easy. There will be resistance. There will be boredom. There will be moments when even the simplest routine feels too much. But that's where the system proves its worth. Because when emotions fluctuate, systems stabilize. They keep you aligned. They remind you of who you are, especially when you forget. And this is what separates the disciplined from the distracted. Not willpower, but structure. Not intensity, but execution. If you're always chasing motivation, you'll always be chasing. But when you have a system, you become the one who leads, the one who moves forward even when it's dark, unclear, or hard. The one who doesn't wait for conditions to be perfect because your habits are already in motion. You don't need to think. You don't need to hype yourself up. You just start. And that's the power of simplicity. It removes the emotional cost of doing the right thing. A good system isn't sexy. It's not glamorous. It won't impress anyone. But it works. And over time, it compounds. And when you stack small, repeatable wins day after day, they become something bigger than the effort itself. They become a new identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who struggles with follow-through. You start seeing yourself as someone who shows up, quietly, consistently, unshakably. That shift isn't loud, but it's life-altering. Stoic philosophy is rooted in practicality. It's not about theory, it's about application. And application demands rhythm. If you want inner clarity, emotional control, and long-term results, you don't need more complexity. You need a framework you'll actually follow. Something that removes decision fatigue and reinforces your values without needing to be perfect. Because perfection is a trap. But commitment, that's a tool. A system is just that, commitment in motion. So, start small, start simple, start today. And when it stops feeling exciting, that's fine. Let it feel boring, let it feel ordinary. That's how you know it's working. Because the goal was never to feel motivated. The goal was to change. And change doesn't come from what you do once. It comes from what you repeat, what you automate, what becomes part of who you are. Build your system, then stick to it. Not for a week, not until it's hard, but until it's yours. Until it no longer feels like effort, just identity. And when that happens, you don't just move forward, you never look back. 8. Do it to respect yourself. You don't have to prove anything to the world, but you do owe something to the person staring back at you in the mirror. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't loud, impressive, or public. It's simply keeping your word to yourself. Self-respect isn't built on praise or applause. It's built quietly, in private, through the promises you keep when no one else would notice if you broke them. And every time you show up for yourself, when it's easier not to, you reclaim something most people spend their whole lives chasing: inner trust. Most people don't realize how much damage they do to themselves by constantly backing out of their own commitments. Every time you say you'll wake up earlier, eat better, be more focused, and then break that with no consequence, you're not just losing time, you're losing credibility with yourself. Once you no longer believe your own words, discipline becomes a struggle, focus becomes fragile, and confidence becomes performance. You start acting like someone strong, hoping the feeling will follow. But deep down, you know you've been inconsistent. That gap between who you say you are and what you actually do, that's where self-respect erodes. Not in grand failures, but in small, silent retreats from your own standards. And that's why leveling up can't just be about ambition or aesthetics. It has to be about honor. Not in the external sense, but in the personal one. The quiet code you live by when no one's watching. Stoic philosophy doesn't tell you to chase perfection. It tells you to live with integrity. To become someone whose actions reflect their values, not their mood. And that means doing what you said you'd do. Even on the days you're tired, frustrated, or alone. Especially on those days. Because that's when it matters most. That's when your word stops being theory and becomes character. You don't need anyone else to validate that. You don't need anyone to witness it. You just need to be the kind of person who doesn't lie to himself. That's where strength starts. Not in power over others, but in power over your own choices. And that kind of strength is rare, because it requires you to go beyond excuses, to stop negotiating with your lower self, to stop explaining your behavior away, and just start aligning it. Not for attention, not for approval, but because it's what you said you'd do. Because it's who you said you wanted to be. Respect is a feeling, but it's also a system. And if you keep showing up for yourself long enough, the results stop being external. They become internal. They become a baseline. And when that happens, you stop chasing motivation. You stop waiting to feel like doing the work. You just do it, because not doing it would feel like disrespect. Not to others, but to you. And that shift? That's the beginning of peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from life being easy, but the kind that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself, no matter how hard it gets. Self-respect is the ultimate foundation for long-term growth. It's what gives your discipline meaning. It's what makes your habits feel non-negotiable. It's what turns chaos into order. And the best part? You don't need a big win to earn it. You just need consistency. Show up when you said you would, finish what you started, speak less, follow through more. It's simple, but not easy. That's why it works. Because the world is full of people who talk, but rare is the one who acts quietly, daily, and without applause. The Stoics would call that virtue. We call it strength, and the world needs more of it. So if you're stuck, if you're frustrated, if you're tired of feeling like you're not living up to your potential, don't make a dramatic plan. Just go back to the basics. Ask yourself, where am I breaking promises to myself? And then stop. Not with force, but with clarity, with respect, with the decision to become someone whose word matters, especially to himself. Because when you start living like that, everything around you shifts. Your confidence returns, your focus sharpens. And your energy no longer comes from pressure, it comes from alignment. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to stop abandoning yourself. And the moment you do that, the moment you make a habit of honoring the small things, you begin to reclaim the one thing no one can give you and no one can take away. Self-respect. From that, everything grows. Discipline, direction, peace, and power. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger, quietly, privately. Without needing permission, without seeking approval, just doing the work, day after day, because you said you would. And because the person in the mirror deserves nothing less. You don't transform your life through a single breakthrough moment. You transform it by doing the quiet, difficult things, again and again, until they shape not just what you do, but who you are. Everything we've walked through, refusing to settle, showing up without motivation, stepping into discomfort, refining our habits, reshaping our self-image, choosing the right people, creating systems, and honoring our own word, are not isolated tactics. They are principles. Daily principles rooted in Stoic discipline, designed to train your mind, fortify your character, and build the kind of life that can withstand anything. And the truth is, these aren't things you learn once. They're things you live. You build mental toughness by practicing clarity over noise, structure over chaos, and intention over impulse. You train discipline by doing the small, quiet work that no one sees. You gain self-respect by acting in ways that align with your highest standards, especially when no one else is watching. Start where you are. Pick one principle. Apply it. Live it for a week, then another. Let these ideas become part of your system. Don't rush the process. Strength isn't built overnight. It's built through stillness, discomfort, resilience, and self-control. In time, those efforts will compound into clarity, consistency, and real freedom. If this message spoke to something in you, If it echoed your own internal search for more, then I encourage you to reflect on how these Stoic tools can fit into your life. Use them, test them, make them yours. And as you do, share your story in the comments. Someone out there might be stuck in the same place you were. Your journey could be the very thing that helps them rise. Start now. Train daily. Live with purpose. Level up with intention.